Good afternoon, Littleton. Welcome to 01460 on the Go, the podcast for Littletonians by Littletonians. Today is July 30th, 2026. First elected in 2020, Matthew Nordhaus served on the Littleton Select Board for 6 years before deciding not to run for re-election in 2026. He continues to volunteer as an elected member of the Littleton Housing Authority and serves on the Affordable Housing Trust. I've invited Matthew to the podcast to discuss his time on the board today. Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Sure.
It's so lovely to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a while. Let's start by talking about your decision to run back in 2020.
Sure.
What prompted you to step up? Because it's a big it's a big step, right?
I was pretty uninvolved with any town politics prior to that, but in like 2017, 2018, I fell in with a bad crowd, like a bunch of progressives. And a good friend of mine, Chase Gerbig, got elected to the board, and I helped him at the campaign. And It sort of got me interested in it. And I think when he chose not to run again and he asked me to take his seat or to run for his seat, I got involved as a result. And also at that time, my wife was trying to open a cannabis shop. This was just after the cannabis laws had been repealed, and there was a lot of process around that I felt was really not transparent, and there was a lot of favoritism showed, I think, by both the board and some other town officials. And so one of the reasons I got involved was to sort of shine a light on, to increase transparency and try to shine a light on what was going on.
What were some of the considerations that you took into account? I know some folks have to talk to their families, other folks have to think about, their jobs.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you had to take into consideration before you were ready to make the leap?
I really didn't have a lot of hesitation about doing it, actually.
That's great.
Looking back on it, I think, I wasn't aware of the time commitment, which I probably would have been concerned about had I known in advance. I was also relatively I didn't really have an agenda. Like, for example, some people might run because they have a project that they want to push or there's tax reform or something. And I was interested in exposing transparency, but I really didn't have any sort of motives beyond that. There was no tangible thing I wanted to happen, nothing built, nothing created. And so I think I felt like I was going to be an objective person on the board without an axe to grind, I guess. So yeah, no, I didn't. I think my family, my wife supported me 100%. She was my campaign manager and essentially got me elected. So I gotta give her props for that. No, I didn't. I really also felt like after I saw what Chase did and the sort of time he spent, I felt like it was almost a public service thing to spend your time to do it.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely a public service thing, right?
Yeah.
Certainly, it's not for the money.
It's not for the money. That's correct.
So the start of your tenure was not exactly typical, right? Because you joined in May of 2020, and we were right in the beginning of the really bad parts, I think, of the corona pandemic.
Yeah.
And so, typically when I think about the pandemic and the town, I tend to think, school committee. Probably because I had school-age kids at the time, and I think, Board of Health. But Select Board was right in the middle of things, too, to a certain extent. What was that like to come on board, in a time of crisis like that?
It was doubly intimidating for me because not only was I dealing with that, but I had no idea how the Select Board worked and no idea how to get information or what kind of what I was going to be able to do as a member of the board. I think that I was, I came in with a lot of ideas that there could be things that the Select Board could do. And I definitely campaigned sort of on my dissatisfaction with how I felt like the Board of Health was handling the crisis. And after I got on, I think it became more clear to me that really there wasn't a whole lot that the Board of Health could have done. I mean, I know that the Life Care Center was really bad. There was a big, the COVID swept through there, and obviously those people were very vulnerable. And I think a lot of people felt like something should have been done, but I'm not really sure in hindsight that anything could have been done differently from what it was. I mean, we had great first responders, and we had, a Board of Health who I think, while not necessarily they didn't have the appropriate experience necessarily. They weren't at that time. I don't think there were nurses or doctors on the board. Nevertheless, I think they were committed to doing whatever they could. And really, like, we were listening to the Neshoba Board of Health at the time, who said,
Right.
Here's what you can and can't do.
Right.
I think perhaps if the current Board of Health had been in place, they would have pushed back harder and maybe insisted on some, state intervention or something else. But even then, it's a very murky thing.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that surprised me a little bit was that that people were politicizing the issue. I mean, the mask mandates was big.
Sure.
I think that there was a group of citizens who were incredibly knowledgeable, and they were immunologists and data scientists who got together. It was the COVID advisory team. They were volunteers doing it on their free time,
Right.
sort of like looking at the data and trying to give their best advice to the select board on what to do. And they were recommending masks as like one of the most effective ways of preventing the spread. But there were definitely people who were pushing back against it, and I think it was largely on a political basis and not based on the data. I think the school board had a hard time because I think it was tough to, it's tough to get like elementary school kids to wear masks.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Sit in their seats and not talk to anybody. I mean, that's
Right.
just impossible. But
Right.
but a townwide mandate, I mean, I think people saw it as a personal freedom issue. And I think, I viewed it as a, data-driven decision to like help reduce fatalities, honestly. So I was surprised by people like turning it into a political thing.
Yeah, so sort of a crash course on the limits of power and on, the sort of unlimited well of politicization.
I think those are both accurate statements. Yeah.
When you think back on your whole time on the SB, what are some of the things that you are proudest of? And it doesn't, whether it's yours specifically or it's just something the board achieved as a team or.
So I think that probably the biggest thing was when I joined, I think there was a pretty contentious relationship between the board and the town employees. I think that the board was inappropriately interfering with the business of running the town, whereas we should be a policy board, not a sort of, implementation board.
Right, right.
And I think that after, Mark and Gary and you were elected, and really the term after I joined, we started to push to change things around. And I think we obviously made some big changes in the leadership. And I think that the sort of experience of the town staff has changed a lot.
Yeah.
And they've told me that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I'm the most proud of. I think that, you can't have a effective governance without people who want to do their job and are happy doing it. We had a lot of turnover for the first 2 or 3 years that I was there. We went through 3 or 4 finance directors. We lost, I think, 6 or 7 department heads in the space of a year or two. And that has largely slowed down. It's become much more stable. And I think I have friendships with several of the department heads, and I talk to them very candidly about what's going on. And I think that they largely are, pretty satisfied with. I mean, there's always issues, of course.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Any place of employment, right?
But I think that's probably the thing that I'm most happy about. I do think that the orchard is the other one.
That's what I was going to say.
So that was one that was a hard lesson. As just for those listening at home, we wanted to sell the orchard.
Right.
And the orchard working group that I was on spent a couple of years really looking at all the information and came up with a good plan. And the truth is that the town is a terrible landlord. Right. And it was the right thing to do. Right. And we brought it to town meeting and we failed by, I don't know, like 6 votes or something.
It was close.
And I was kind of crushed by that. But as it turns out, it worked out really well because we found a tenant who's amazing. Yes. And is taking care of the place and is rehabbing it and is using it for not as an orchard, but as a sort of a biodiversity, like growing trees.
Right,
and
nursery, native nursery, right?
Yeah. So it couldn't have turned out better.
Yeah. That was surprising. I think after that went down, we all sort of looked at each other and thought, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
We've tried to lease this out. Nobody wants it. And we've tried to make, we've tried everything else we can. And now, this last avenue has been closed. Yeah. So we did one more Hail Mary RFP and sure enough, there was Jonathan Bransfield.
Yep.
So
It worked out really well. I was,
Yeah.
I couldn't be happier about where we're at right now with that.
Yeah.
But that was an interesting lesson in, I think a lot of the working group was really frustrated. Several of them quit after that vote.
Yep.
And I think that was a great lesson for me in how, you can work really hard on something and have all the information and still get sidelined by what is essentially like an emotional response to something.
Mm-hmm.
And you shouldn't take that out of the equation.
And you've got to keep trying, right?
Yeah, that too. Yeah,
Right.
that's right. Yeah.
I'm going to pivot a little bit because you do have a day job.
Yes.
Is there any crossover between, what you do for your day job and the skills that you needed for your day job and what you applied in SB or vice versa?
So I work as a product manager for an online education company.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think there's a whole lot that's like specialized that I bring to the board. Like
Leadership consensus
Well,
stuff?
I think there's communication is
Yeah.
important, and I think understanding and being aware of the fact that you never get what you really want is kind of important. I mean, that has definitely been like something. But a lot of the stuff I learned on the job.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely learned about the pace of things in municipal government being like glacial.
Right, the pace of government, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was a good lesson to learn, and I made my peace with it, and am used to things like taking a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think I learned about, as we just spoke about, like the sort of the emotional response that people have to like decisions that get made for the right reasons,
Mm-hmm.
and how that can derail things sometimes. And I think, I also was pleasantly surprised to learn about the sort of impact that people can have by participating.
Can you say more about that?
Well, when you think about how many people are in Littleton and how many actually are involved in the government,
Right.
like you and I both know, we see the same faces over and over on the committees.
A lot of
We
time,
see
yeah.
the same set of people who are volunteering for things,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's far less than 10% of the populace who is actually actively involved in running the town.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't understand, people who are frustrated or angry about the political situation in the country today don't really understand how much impact they could have on their day-to-day life if they got involved.
Right.
I mean, one person could literally start a movement, propose an initiative or a project, lobby for it, and make it happen in town. And that's not something you can do on the state level. It's definitely not something you can do on the national level unless you're incredibly lucky.
Right.
Right.
Shaker Lane, I thought, was an interesting example of that because I don't think, there were a lot of different parts of the team, right? There was a grassroots group, there was the town side of employees and of volunteers, like the select board, and then there was also, of course, the school committee and the school employees. But without all of them, I don't think Shaker Lane, right, would have passed, right? Each of those different parts of the puzzle sort of played a really important role, critical role, really.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of different ways for residents in Littleton to have stepped up in that, and they did. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
example, and it's true too that I learned a lot. I learned how our town government works, and I think that is even now that I'm not on the board, I know where to look and who to ask questions about or what to pay attention to when I want information about something. And I think if people don't have the time, and you have kids, you have a hard job,
Right.
That I totally get it.
Sure.
But for those who are looking for something and a way to contribute or a way to reverse the craziness that's going on or to, give back, it's really, it's easy to find something meaningful to do and something meaningful to contribute.
I think that's part of the reason that we see the same faces a lot of the time is because you when you get involved, it's usually in a smaller way, right? And it works, and you feel good about what you're doing, and you can see the impact you have, and so you start, volunteering for other things, and I can take on this board, or I can show up to this event, and there's a lot of it's almost like a pipeline.
Yeah,
people
and
people
almost,
get started, and they're generally their interest expands.
Yeah, And I think it's more than just an altruistic interest in helping others. It's like, oh, I can make a difference.
Yes.
I can do something I want done.
Yes.
Or I can approach this problem that needs solving.
Yeah.
I think that's a really compelling reason to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sort of building on that a little bit, in some ways we're talking about the future, right? What's going to impacting the future, and what are you most excited about for Littleton's future? What do you see are the challenges and the opportunities that are coming our way?
I think the biggest challenge is always going to be growth. Mm-hmm. I think that I often said there's no way for us to contain it. Mm-hmm. And I think Joe Knox, who was on the board when I first started and has been in town for many years, mm-hmm. and was a real estate agent. He said to me, we basically stifled any development for years and years and years and years, and it really came back to hammer on us, because then suddenly we didn't have any control over what was happening at all.
Interesting.
And so I think that, the town is going to continue to expand until it's built out. Mm-hmm. And what we need to focus on is saving as much of the land as we can to be not developed. Mm-hmm. And whether that means a partnership with a private entity or a nonprofit like the Littleton Conservation Trust, or mm-hmm. actually purchasing property, or setting aside land when you do a housing development or affordable housing. I think it's very important that we focus on protecting as much as we can, because obviously, the joke is we're not making any more land.
Right.
Right?
Right. And
so I think that managing that growth is going to be very, very difficult.
Versus stopping.
We can't stop it. That people want to stop it, and they need to realize there's absolutely no way to stop it. Land is too valuable in Massachusetts. We have a great town with amazing schools.
We sure do.
We are close to the commuter rail. We have close to 495. We're a very desirable community. Mm-hmm. We've seen the value of our homes skyrocket in the last 5 to 10 years.
Sure.
And the reason is people want to live here.
Yeah.
And that's not going away. And when there's that much demand, every piece of land that can be developed will be developed. Mm-hmm. So we gotta really try hard to protect what we have.
Interesting. Okay, so here's a hypothetical for you. You gotta bear with me, because I think you and I have talked about this a lot. One of the most frequent things that comes up in terms of challenges for the town is residents not knowing what all the different moving parts of town are doing, and volunteers who are doing that work not feeling like they can really get the word out, right? That they can communicate what they're doing. Yeah. And so in my head, it's this glass wall, and there's people on both sides sort of doing the, you're on mute, I can't hear you, whining. Yeah. If you could get the ear of everyone in Littleton at once, what would you want people to, what would your message be, or what would you want people to understand? I mean, setting aside the thousands of folks from Littleton that are tuned into this podcast mm-hmm. right now. Yeah. Thousands. Yeah. What are, for the few remaining folks who aren't listening to the podcast, what would you wish them to hear about town?
I think, that they should pay attention. That they don't have to get involved, but that things that are happening in the town government is going to affect them one way or another sooner or later. And I understand you and I have talked, it's very hard to find a way to disperse information effectively. Yeah. We don't have a newspaper. Right. There isn't a central, message board or any kind of web-based thing where everybody goes. No, social media
lots of different places, but
but social media is really difficult and dangerous. And before I was on the board, or before I got involved with it's actually the housing authority that I started at, I was really completely disconnected and ignorant, not in a bad way, of the town. And I think if I had known then what I know now, I would have been I should probably at least pay attention to the warrant, go to town meetings, see what's happening in the votes that need to be taken, because some of them are going to affect me. Mm-hmm. And whether it's are we going to protect this piece of land or not? Are we going to build a new fire station? How much are taxes going to go up when we build Shaker Lane? Like all those are things that people probably really do want to know about.
Right.
And I think that the people who aren't paying any attention at all for any reason, and that there are lots of good reasons that they are not involved,
Sure.
then become they get really upset when something happens to affect them, and they say, "Why didn't I know about this?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I don't have a good solution to where they should go to look for information.
Right, which is something we keep working on,
Yeah.
right? Podcasts and newsletters and,
Right.
and all of the above, social
But I think
media.
it goes in both directions. Like we can do better to distribute information,
Yep.
but people could absolutely do better in like just looking for something, like looking a little bit into what they might be interested in, or even just checking in to see what's going on in case something is about to affect them in a significant way.
On that note, I think we'll wrap it up.
Okay.
Thanks for coming.
That was quick.
Yeah, well, we try.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Littleton, in 2 weeks, you'll be hearing from Kyle Bupp, our newest select board member. He'll be hosting the podcast in 2 weeks, and I will see you in about 4 weeks. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.